Continuing on with Chapter 19, going on to page 571, we have something called Hubbert's Peak. This guy named Hubbert predicted that U.S. oil production would peak in 1970. He was laughed at the time, but then we actually found out he was right. You actually don't know a peak at the time. You know a peak about 10 years later, and he was right. Oil reserves are projected to last another 40 years according to your textbook. On the AP test, they say 50 years. So just remember those two numbers for your AP test. Crude oil. So we do a lot of things with crude oil, which again is petroleum. We refine it by distilling it according to its boiling point, and we create all kinds of other fuels like butane, naphtha. This is how we get our car gasoline, kerosene, diesel, lubricating oil, heavy gas oil. And so we take crude oil, we pump it out of the ground, and then we do different things to it in a refiner, and now we turn it into different products. So from 1 barrel of oil, we get all kinds of products: gasoline, diesel fuel, jet fuel, heavy fuel oil, etc. All right, there's something, a new source of crude oil that's not in your book, but you need to know it. It's been on the AP test on FRQs in the past. Shale. So oil shale is in the U.S., western United States. It is a sedimentary rock filled with kerogen, which is just a fancy word for organic matter. And this can be processed to produce liquid petroleum. They get this shale out through strip mining or sometimes underground mining, so either one can get the oil from the shale. Turning to the next page, we have another oil source that again is not in your book, but it's on the AP test. It's kind of new. Oil sands or tar sands in Canada. These are deposits of moist sand and clay containing what's called bitumen, which is a thick and heavy form of petroleum. They strip mine it or they use chemicals to liquefy it, which is a huge environmental degradation. You're going to see an article by National Geographic about this as one of your assignments. Another item that again is not in your book because it's rather new is the Keystone Pipeline. It's in the news to this day. In fact, I heard about it on the radio driving in this morning. It's an oil pipeline being built from Canada to Texas from the oil sands in Canada down into into the U.S. to different refineries to turn it into gasoline. And now it's facing a lot of lawsuits because, first of all, what they're doing in Canada is actually pretty terrible to the environment. And then also this is not really a solution to renewable energies, less carbon dioxide, less air pollution. It's facing lawsuit because it's going across some protected land as well. Natural gas is mostly methane, which is CH4, and please know that CH4 is methane. There are other volatile hydrocarbons also in natural gas as well, not just methane, but mostly methane. It is the cleanest fossil fuel, so it has the least amount of air pollution and the least amount of carbon dioxide released. In the United States, we have thousands of miles of natural gas pipelines. Leaks can explode and be deadly. This has happened in San Francisco and in Bellingham, Washington, where there was an underground explosion from a natural gas line and killed people, just kind of randomly. And they're kind of all over everywhere. You can't avoid them. And that's a problem that needs to be addressed. Natural gas, your top producers and consumers. So the top producer is Russia. The top consumer is us in the United States. Make sure you know those. Something else to know that's not in your book, you need to know about methane hydrate. So right now we have identified this substance embedded in crystal lattice form on the ocean floor. And it's there, it's methane. The problem is that we don't know how to get it out safely without causing explosions, fires, huge amounts of climate change, bad stuff. So we know it's there. It could potentially be used as a fuel source, but we don't, again, know how to get it out safely. All right, this is a big deal right here. Again, it's so new it's not in your book, but you need to know about fracking. It was on an FRQ last year on the AP test. So fracking is where we get out natural gas embedded in rocks. We pump water or chemicals into these rocks to crack them. So at high pressure, we crack the rocks and extract the natural gas. The problem, and there's a lot of videos and documentaries and news reports about this lately, is that the natural gas or these really terrible chemicals can leak into aquifers and contaminate people's well water. And that is bad, bad news. Expect this to be on your AP test in some way. All right, on page 576, we talk about extraction. First, we go over coal mining, which we've gone over a little bit before, actually quite extensively before. But here's some problems with coal mining. Destroys habitat, soil erosion, acid mine drainage. Mountaintop removal causes clogging of streams and rivers with debris, which is called the overburden. And then underground, subsurface mining causes black lung disease. And a review from way back in chapters 2 and 3, these are external costs. They are not factored into the price of the coal. Therefore, coal is cheap. So coal is cheap because when you buy coal or you buy electricity where coal is burned for electricity, you're not paying for the health effects from black lung disease. You're not paying for the cleanup of the streams and rivers, for the acid rain, things like that. Going on to page 577, oil extraction alters the environment in these ways. You have to build roads to drilling sites, and this fragments habitat. Very important to know that. We have to build houses for workers. We build pipelines. We create waste piles. So these are all the ways oil extraction, which is pumping out of the ground. We don't mine for oil. We pump oil. We extract it. These are the ways it harms the environment. Page 578 and 579. Make sure you know what OPEC is and what the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is on page 579. Those will be on your test. Page 580 shows how oil travels around the world and who uses it the most. 581 shows production versus consumption of oil. Page 582 talks about energy conservation, which is important. AP Test likes to ask FRQs about ways to save energy. So the CAFE standards, we'll talk about that in a minute. Buy a car with high miles per gallon can save on oil. Insulate buildings to prevent loss of heat or air conditioning. Buying Energy Star appliances and replacing your lighting with energy efficient lighting. Those are all ways to save energy. On page 583, know this graph about ANWR and really the amount of oil that's available in ANWR. Know what the term cogeneration means, which is where you kind of reuse some of the waste products from electricity generation and do something else with it. That's a really good source of not wasting energy. CAFE standards, what are those? All right, so CAFE stands, it's an acronym. It means Corporate Auto Fleet Efficiency, I think, or emissions. Well, what it is it's the minimum miles per gallon a fleet of cars per company like Ford or Dodge or Toyota or Honda or Volkswagen, your whole fleet of cars and trucks together, they have to have a minimum miles per gallon. So in other words, all your cars have to average 30 miles per gallon. So you can sell some that get 40 and you can sell some that get 20, but they have to all average to 30. And that law fluctuates, so every year the miles per gallon standard gets tougher, and so they can improve over time. What this does is it promotes fuel economy in cars and lessens air pollution and also greenhouse gases, and saves people a lot of money in gas. 585, governments can promote energy conservation through these methods: tax breaks, rebates for energy efficient appliances, allowing hybrid cars in a carpool lane, by promoting CAFE standards. We do that in the U.S., but you could talk about it for other countries if you're asked this on an FRQ. The government could also subsidize alternative energy sources like wind and solar. And those are all ways that governments, not just the U.S., but other governments in other countries, and they do, by the way. Germany does a lot of these kinds of things, especially subsidizing your alternative energy sources. California does tax breaks for energy-efficient appliances. We also do tax breaks for solar power. If you put solar panels on your houses. We used to allow hybrid cars in the carpool lane, but then they got too crowded, so they don't allow them anymore. And the U.S. has CAFE standards. And that is it for Chapter 19.